President taking credit here, but also inserting some distance between him and some of these new state laws.
Well, David, these tweets grabbing a lot of attention, one, because of the topic, but also because up until now, this is an issue that Vice President Pence has championed in this administration.
That's right. Pence has in the past called Donald Trump the most pro-life president in American history, but it's Pence really, as an evangelical, who has put this issue front and center, much more so than Trump. Yesterday, the vice president gave the commencement speech at Taylor University in his home state of Indiana, and he talked about how proud he is to work for an administration that, in his words, has stood without apology for the sanctity of human life. Obviously, the administration expects some of these new laws to land in court, and that's why the president has taken such care in his Supreme Court picks, both of them chosen very much with this issue in mind. Eva?
All right, David Wright for us at the White House. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Eva. So much to talk about this morning, so let's bring in our chief anchor, George Stephanopoulos, who's going to be hosting This Week later this morning. Good morning. So let's talk about the politics of this abortion story. Obviously, the president is going out of his way to tout his pro-life bona fides on Twitter. But how does this issue cut for him? I mean, I know it helps with the base, but could it alienate some suburban women who he needs to win?
Basically, abortion tends to work against whichever party seems more extreme on the issue. That's why you saw with the president back in the State of the Union address was trying to focus on the Democrats' support for late-term abortions. That's where they want the focus to be. But this Alabama law, the Missouri law, these other laws, fetal heartbeat laws that have been passing in the South flip that equation because they don't have those exceptions, for example, for rape and incest, which most Americans completely disagree with. And you also have this issue with abortion of be careful what you wish for. If indeed the Alabama law gets to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court decides to overturn Roe v. Wade, that is far more likely to energize Democratic voters next fall than Republican.
All right, speaking of Democratic voters, let's loop back to Joe Biden, who we were talking about a moment ago. He was out on the campaign trail yesterday. You on your show this morning have three of these sort of lesser-known Democratic contenders. How does anybody stand out in a field of 23 with Joe Biden at the top?
That's the big question right now. 23 candidates as of this week. And one of the things we're committed to at ABC and at This Week is making sure that all the candidates are heard. We've already interviewed 10 on This Week, 3 more, as you point out today.
Actually, let me continue to talk about the sex strike, because there's some other things
I think people expected him to get into the race and be the front runner. What's been a little bit of a surprise is that he's actually increased his lead over the last several weeks since he had that soft launch before the official launch. Yesterday, no front runner gets to the nomination without a clear challenge, without going over a lot of hurdles. A million things can happen between now and the convention next summer. But the question for all those other candidates right now is how do you break out? How do you distinguish yourself from the front row? What do you do to take them down? That's some of the questions we're going to be posing this morning.
I think the one thing we can say for sure is it's going to be pretty interesting. George Stephanopoulos, thank you. Full Employment Act for you. And a reminder, George has a big show this morning. As mentioned, he's going to speak with 3 Democratic presidential candidates, John Hickenlooper, Seth Martin, and Tulsi Gabbard, plus Martha Raddatz is going to sit down with the former CIA Director General David Petraeus to talk about the escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran. This is all coming up on This Week right here on ABC. George, thank you again.
Thank you.
Also, Alyssa Milano is married, so that kind of means she's an adulteress and whatever, right?
I was driving
this
home
whole
through
sex
torrential rain
is
when my car
hilarity.
Swept into a flash
It's also
flood.
kind of sad in the sense that
I scrambled up this really big tree, and I knew my wife wouldn't know what was going to happen to me. So I video chatted her, and I said, yeah, I'm up in a tree. After about 5 hours, a lot of phone calls with emergency services. They sent a helicopter to pick me up to safety. This network, that giant tree,
transaction is
the network more people rely on gives you more, like unlimited with Apple Music included, and big savings on our best phones when you switch. That's
right.
Verizon.
Then I'll give you sex. Right? It is kind of an economic.
And guys, we move on to Alabama, an uproar over the state's controversial abortion law. A reminder: this law makes it a felony for any doctor to perform an abortion unless the life of the mother is in danger. There are no exceptions for rape and incest. Now, in Alabama, a boycott movement with the hashtag Boycott Alabama is gaining a lot of traction online. So I want to go to Steve Osunsami, who has more.
It leads to more objectification. It doesn't
Kimberly,
lead to
the fight over these new abortion restrictions, these laws that are being passed in state legislatures, primarily in the South, has moved from legislative to economic. We're standing in front of the Georgia State Capitol right now,
where lawmakers here passed what is being called the heartbeat law. It essentially bans abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Most people would say when a fetal heartbeat can be detected. And critics point out that that essentially is a near total ban of abortions because that's before most
completely
women
ridiculous
even know
charade
that
that makes
they're
absolutely
pregnant.
no sense. This
the
is Amanda.
concern here is over the film industry. More than 450 films have been filmed in Georgia, films and TV shows. This is a huge business here, and it is being said the number of actors and production companies are threatening to either pull their productions or refuse to film here because of the laws, these abortion laws that are happening. And that is
continue to read this for yourself, but it just kind of presents a bunch of nonsense.
Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor and lost to
there's no actual logic
has come out essentially saying that that's not such a great idea, that you're punishing workers. And I would add, as a resident here, that
really it's just a way for you to make more money.
Most of the people
it's her using her body and capitalism to capitalize on the fact that people are talking about this abortion issue. She happens to be a model. That's how she gets her popularity.
Is now threatening a boycott against the state of Alabama.
Capitalizing on this political problem by saying, "Oh, I took this particular picture, which is the exact same thing I do literally every single day, because I have a problem with
and against Mercedes-Benz, which builds cars in Alabama and has headquarters here in Georgia.
Feminism and progressivism objectifying women, saying that the idea
the next
of being
wave of activity on this issue, which is this economic boycott. But again,
why? Well, because
many residents here would say that it is it's misplaced.
Like I said, it's like
the end game here, of course, is the Supreme Court. This will end up in the Supreme Court. It takes 4 justices to hear the challenges to these laws,
objectifying women,
and the abortion, anti-abortion
different way, and kind of the reverse way, but nonetheless,
that they now have enough justices to overturn Roe v. Wade, of course, which was the 1973 decision.
You can't see it now. There's absolutely no way that you ever could see it. But nonetheless,
thank you, Steve.
That does kind of get us to move over to a new law, or not a new law, a new article that will actually be
now to Missouri becoming the latest state about to put tougher restrictions on abortion. The governor saying he'll sign a bill passed by the State House and Senate.
President Trump has denounced the restrictive abortion bans.
With the series of legal battles on abortion being teed up across the country. Good morning, Stephanie.
Eva, good morning. After hours of debate,
which, I mean, it's not that he's
100%
anti-abortion
legislation with a vote of 110
if you look at
to
just
44.
Pure track record. I guess the thing is you can kind of, it depends on what your view of Ronald Reagan is. Either he was somebody who
after Alabama
had
passed a near total abortion ban, the
early on
state of Missouri is showing it can too. Missouri's House and Senate passed a bill that bans abortions after 8 weeks of pregnancy.
But nonetheless,
Missouri is taking a stand.
The reason I say
Missouri
that
stands
has the
for the
audacity
unborn.
is just because
Some lawmakers making emotional pleas against the bill.
This is nothing but an affront, not to Roe versus Wade, but to what it stands for, to the U.S. Constitution itself.
But nonetheless,
the right to privacy in this country, privacy from intrusion from your government.
The law goes into effect in Missouri as soon as Republican Governor Mark Parsons signs the bill, and he's hinted he will. In Missouri's only remaining abortion clinic, Dr. David Eisenberg is concerned.
When women don't think there's an option for a safe, legal, and accessible abortion in their state or near them, they're going to seek whatever care they can find, and many women are going to be hurt or injured or potentially lose their life.
Missouri is now the 5th state this year to pass a heartbeat bill, which means a state will not perform the procedure if a heartbeat is detected. But neither the Alabama law nor the proposed Missouri bill have exemptions for cases of rape or incest. Abortions would only be allowed if there's a serious health risk to the mother.
This gives more rights to the rapist than it does to the mother.
All of it leading to having the law challenged and reach the Supreme Court, where the new balance of power could overturn Roe versus Wade or dramatically change the landmark decision which declared abortion legal.
There is a very strong likelihood that Roe is in real jeopardy in the very near term, and I think that was actually kind of clear even with the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. The Supreme Court could, if it wanted to, take up one of these cases
trying to warn you guys up a lot is that Trump really isn't
And Stephanie Ramos joining us. The question now, what's next in these
He seems to have this aura of conservatism around him.
There are several appeals that are being launched on the laws that have been passed. And then there are some proposals that are close to being passed. Louisiana, for instance, is now just one House vote away from advancing a bill similar to Missouri's. And both Wisconsin and Texas have several bills in motion to restrict abortions, including cuts to Planned Parenthood funding. But other states are moving ahead with laws to help protect anti-abortion laws. Vermont has passed a bill protecting abortion rights, and Illinois is expected to do the same.
It is definitely a bipartisan thing to call out the establishment
in Washington.
Now, is there a media bias towards the left?
I have one kid in each branch of the military, but I'm Command Central.
And it is, to a certain extent, Trump has kind of become a beacon, or a lightning rod,
when I have a child deployed, having a reliable network
their hatred,
everything.
right?
So when I get a video chat and I get to see their face, it's the best thing
which is not even a bad thing.
However,
if you're a conservative who wanted that, you could have elected someone who did that, who was also a conservative, for example, Ted Cruz or Ron Paul, who actually did it in a much more polite way too. Never got really aggressive or anything like that, right? Somebody like a Pat Buchanan, although I have my questions about Pat Buchanan for sure. Definitely not as much as I do about Trump, though.
To A-list celebrities who are vowing not to work or spend money in that state, and it is not just Alabama now. ABC Steve Osami is in Atlanta and seeing Georgia now facing the same backlash in the wake of a new anti-abortion law there.
His most conservative opinions, in my opinion, are things he's actually consistently criticized by other conservatives for, which is his willingness to implement protectionist policies so that we can try to actually get some American industry revitalized again, try and not have the
last few years, thanks to generous tax breaks approved by lawmakers,
economically speaking, by the rest of the world,
the Avengers, the Blind Side, and so many more.
But nonetheless,
now that those same lawmakers are either banning or nearly banning abortions, Hollywood actors
President
and
Donald Trump
producers
broke
are
his
calling
silence
for
on the increasing
boycotts.
trend of states passing
In Georgia, which recently banned nearly all abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy,
but that he does not favor
Jason
allowing
Bateman,
women to get
Alyssa
abortions
Milano,
in the case,
Gabrielle Union, and Don Cheadle are all threatening to refuse or pull productions in the state where more than 450 movies and TV shows were filmed last year. Overnight, former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams
threat to the mother's life and said, let's see, right here, there's a quote about it. Yeah, the same position taken by Ronald Reagan, with 3 exceptions: rape, incest, and protecting the life of the mother, with the same position taken as Ronald Reagan. We've come very far in the last 2 years, with 105 wonderful new federal judges, many more to come, 2 great new Supreme Court justices, the Mexico City policy, and a whole new and positive attitude about the right to life. The radical left, with late-term abortion and worse, is imploding on the issue. We must stick together and win for life in 2020. If we are foolish and do not stand united as one, all of our hard-fought gains for life can and will rapidly disappear. Now, sorry, I got a really itchy nose right now. Excuse me. Sorry, you guys had to see that. Anyways, it's not like this is an absolutely horrid position, right? Of course, this does seem to indicate he is mostly pro-life. I would say, as somebody who would fancy myself kind of an abolitionist in this regard, I know that people hear that and they obviously think, zealot or some kind of things like that. And to a certain extent, I kind of like that. I'm glad. And thank you, abolishing human abortion, for making sure people saw that term as, sort of a pro-life zealotry, because there should be pro-life zealotry. I think there's a quote from Barry Goldwater that says, extremism in the pursuit of liberty is no vice, and moderation, I think, and compromise is what he says, is no virtue. I don't know the exact quote off the top of my head, but nonetheless, I think the same general idea is true for anything that you believe firmly as, as objectively moral, objectively true, like, for example, the right to life. The thing is, though, Trump, of course, has been pushed forward as this immensely pro-life guy, when really he's a brand new pro-life guy who hasn't done very much for the pro-life movement, all things considered, at least not any more than another establishment Republican would have probably done. Maybe not so much some of the bigger names in establishment Republican politics, maybe not a Marco Rubio or a Jeb Bush. I could see Chris Christie doing a lot of this kind of stuff, though. I could kind of see Mitt Romney doing a lot of this stuff, to be honest with you. I mean, I could even see George W. Bush doing a lot of the same stuff that Donald Trump has done, and Ronald Reagan, and et cetera, right? But if we wanted to get somebody who was, firmly pro-life, I mean, these exceptions are not... The protecting the life of the mother exception is, of course, an exception because you don't go out of your way. I mean, if one of them is going to die, you need to choose one, basically. That is the consistent pro-life position, right? Rape is, of course, kind of a sensitive issue. I think the general view of most people is that it's such a psychologically traumatic thing that it shouldn't be something that is forced upon mothers or anything like that. The counter argument, of course, is that the punishment for the child is kind of ridiculous considering the child didn't actually do anything. If you'd like, you can give the child up for adoption. It's not like you have to raise it, right, et cetera, et cetera. The incest position is one of the ones I find to be most ridiculous because if it's not forceful incest, i.e. rape, then, I mean, I guess you have to live with your own personal decisions and consequences, you know what I mean? So I don't understand why. This idea that if you have some sort of a genetic or psychological or physical deformity that we can abort you in the womb, I find it to be disgusting and eugenicist, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, obviously President Trump is entitled to his opinion, but it is interesting that he criticizes the Alabama law and then says that we need to stay united. Criticizes the Georgia law and then says we need to stay united. I mean, you're either pro-life or you're not, in my opinion. I do take the counter argument when it comes to the rape issue. I know it's an unfortunate thing. It is a very unfortunate thing, and it's just that I don't think that abortion helps. It just makes it more unfortunate. Now on top of a raped woman, you have a killed baby, right? Whereas originally you just had a raped woman, and it's not like killing the baby solves anything. Now, should we go after the rapist? Of course, there's a completely different argument to be made there. I think Coker versus Georgia is really one. And by the way, how ironic that the state that goes to the Supreme Court fighting for the right to put down rapists also happens to be the state that passes the first super restrictive abortion ban. Who's truly pro-woman is the question, right? But anyways, I think Coker versus Georgia is a horrendous ruling, right? And it's just another example of how the Supreme Court should not be considered to be infallible. Certainly, the death penalty needs to be limited to only things that are considered to be heinous crimes. I think unprovoked murder, torture, pedophilia, and rape. And past that, nothing. But for those 4 crimes in particular, I think, the death penalty is definitely a reasonable solution. You know what I mean? Especially considering we have the death penalty for crimes that are much smaller. Like, for example, treason, right? I mean, if you commit treason, non-violent treason even, right? Treason that gets nobody killed, treason that gets nobody hurt, treason that doesn't scar anyone psychologically speaking, it doesn't do any serious damage. For example, Chelsea Manning, right? Which could have done serious damage, but in the end didn't, right? Well, Chelsea Manning could have very easily been executed for his crimes, right? Definitely. That the United States law is definitely okay with that. The United States law is okay with people being executed for committing habitual crime, right? So this idea that now, of course, some people do take it too far. I don't think you should, give people the death penalty for selling drugs, for example, even hardcore drugs like heroin. It's completely ridiculous. That is definitely cruel or unusual punishment for sure. But I think, when you're talking about things like sexual assault, like serious, violent, aggravated rape, I mean, by all means, that's a very heinous crime. It's a psychologically scarring crime. But I don't think aborting the child helps. And I do think that is a good way to sort of segue into our next article here, which is about Alabama yet again. So Alabama bill would criminalize false rape accusations. And this is countable.us, should more states pass similar laws? Alabama, of course, being the one that has passed the most restrictive out of all of the abortion bans. Legislation making it a crime to falsely accuse someone of sexual assault or rape has been introduced in the Alabama House of Representatives. Alabama State Representative Dickie Drake, who is a Republican from Leeds, proposed a bill that would make false reports of sex crimes a Class C felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Further, if the accused individual is proven innocent, the person who made the false claim would be responsible for the accused legal fees. What's the backstory? Currently, it is illegal to make a false police report in Alabama. According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, for every 1,000 rapes, only 230 are reported to the police. From those 230 reports, only 46 will lead to an arrest, and only 5 cases will lead to a felony conviction. A 2010 study found that between 2 to 10% of all rape allegations are proven to be false. What are people saying? Supporters, like Representative Drake, said he introduced the bill after a friend's ex-wife accused him, the friend, and his new wife of sexually abusing their children. Quote, if they make an accusation, they better make sure it's true and make them think twice before they can make a false accusation, end quote, Drake said. Frank Luntz, a veteran Republican pollster, said told the Washington Post, that among the GOP, quote, there is a feeling of being guilty until proven innocent. In this era of Me Too, there are a lot of men and some women who believe that justice no longer exists in America and that the accusation is enough to destroy someone's career and someone's life, end quote, which is obviously very true. In the wake of Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation hearings, which saw the justice defending himself against claims of sexual assault, Donald Trump Jr. told Daily Mail TV that he feared more for his sons than for his daughters. Critics, director of the Alabama Coalition Against Rape, Kathleen Connolly, said the proposed bill would further deter people from reporting sexual assault, which is already one of the most underreported crimes. Quote, it's not solving a new problem, Connolly said. It is a problem if someone makes a false report, and that's rare. It's an effort to silence men and women who are coming forward about sexual assault. It's an effort to make them afraid to come forward, end quote. Amy Siskin, a feminist activist and author, tweeted that the bill was purely meant to intimidate women. What do you think? Do you support criminalizing false accusations of sex crimes? Why or why not? Take action above and voice your opinion below in the comments. This is written by Veronica Yu. Now, I do like the general idea here. Most definitely. I think that false accusations of rape are definitely a problem, and they certainly should be, people should be held accountable for them, undoubtedly. I have always advocated a law that is kind of in the same vein as the Levitical law, which says that if you falsely accuse somebody of something, then whatever the punishment for that crime would have been would be put on you. So, with that, then whatever the punishment for the rapist would have been if the falsely accused, if the alleged rapist was falsely accused, then that would actually be put on the false accuser, right? Now, I do want to point out a few things here. One of the things here is this number right here. 2 to 10% of all rape allegations are proven to be false, okay? Now, what that means for people who respect the Constitution and the rule of law is that no law criminalizing false allegations could ever have more than this number arrested. Now, why do I point that out? Well, because I'm not 100% sure what the exact reading of this Alabama law is. I will read it to you guys in a future episode when I pull it up. I did not do that today, so my apologies. But if it does follow the rule of law, then it will make sure that the women themselves are also innocent until proven guilty. Everybody in this situation should be innocent until proven guilty. So in other words, if a rape trial comes up, right, and the rapist is found not guilty, that does not mean that the accuser is found guilty, right? The accuser, if you are going to be charging them with a crime as well, needs to also be given the same legal benefit of the doubt. And due to the nature of sexual assault crimes, I don't think we can automatically assume that all rape allegations that turn out to not get a conviction, are false allegations. I just don't think that that is a reasonable assumption. Obviously, a lot of people who falsely accuse, if you were being strict, if you were being legitimate with it, a lot of people who falsely accuse others would get away with it. That is the unfortunate nature of a crime like this, but for the sake of liberty, of the Constitution, of the rule of law, you would have to make sure that those women who are being charged with this crime are proven to have lied beyond a reasonable doubt. That doesn't mean the other person was found innocent. It means that you can prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that not only was the other person innocent, but that this person deliberately deceived the courts, the police, the jury, etc., in order to try and incarcerate the accused, right? So the rule of law needs to be followed in either case. If this Alabama law does that, I say kudos. If it does not, then I say this is a very big problem. It is a violation of the rule of law. I like the general idea, but there's a lot of things I like the general idea of that need to still be done in a constitutionally legal manner, right? I'll give you a perfect example for that, actually. I, of course, as I've already stated here, am pro-life, right? If I'm going to be pro-life, then I don't support the United States government, right, the federal government, passing a sanctity to life bill that makes it nationally a law. We all have to not get an abortion. Why? Because the 10th Amendment of the Constitution very clearly says anything not clearly dictated in the Constitution goes to the states. This is why murder and rape and etc. are state crimes. Now, should every state make abortion a state crime? Of course they should. It is the murder of an innocent child. But it is not the federal government's job, and if the federal government passes a Sanctity of Life Act, they are violating the 10th Amendment of the Constitution by taking away the state's rights to choose what they're going to do for themselves. This is exactly, not exactly the case in this, but this idea of making sure you follow a constitutionally legal framework to pass your agenda is exactly the argument I'm making right now when it comes to this law. If this law is saying something along the lines of, you have been found innocent of this crime and therefore your accuser is going to be found guilty of another crime, namely false allegation, that is not legal. That is not constitutional. That is a violation of liberties. If you are being consistent, if you are being constitutionally accurate and legal and etc., right, and you're actually making sure people need to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt for their crime, then I have absolutely no problem with this law. Like I said, I firmly believe that if you falsely accuse somebody of something and you are proven beyond any shadow of a doubt in a fair trial to have falsely accused people, to deliberately deceive the courts, the police, etc., in order to try and get the accused incarcerated, or, you know, if we have the death penalty, even killed, right, then I think that you should definitely be charged with the exact same punishment coming to you if you are found guilty. But you do need to be found guilty, right? We do need to respect the rule of law. The courts need to make sure everybody who comes before them is innocent until they are proven guilty of their crimes. And it should always be hard to prove people guilty of their crimes. That should just, if you want the rule of law to be respected the way we have it set up in this country with the liberties that we enjoy, it should always be harder to find people guilty, right? But I would like to point out, on that same note, here we have Rain saying there are 1,000 rapes every year, allegedly, or for every 1,000 rapes every year, there are 230 reported to police, allegedly, right? Of course, that, you know, there's no real way to prove that. You just have to take people's word for it. But nonetheless, even if we run with that number, only 46 lead to arrest and only 5 lead to a felony conviction. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but I'm fairly certain that 5 is less than 10% of 230. In fact, less than 2% of 230, which is the low number here. So, and when it says 46 will lead to an arrest, that number is obviously significantly higher than the 10%. It's actually about 20% exactly, right? That's still a relatively low number. So I think what we can kind of agree on when a law is passed like this is a maximum of 70% of crimes, or 70% of reports, we're just going to have to do nothing with if we're being legally consistent. Women, if you want a way to solve that and you are legitimately being sexually assaulted, there are a lot of ways. Number one, and I cannot stress this enough, report your crime as soon as it happens. If possible, within the day. Legitimately, the kind of crime that has been committed is a crime that has very limited time frame for the DNA being able to be caught, for the evidence in general to be able to be actually taken by police and used in a way that can get a conviction. obviously do not actually understand what you are going through. However, if you want this person to go to prison, if you want them to be punished for their crimes, if you want justice for what is done for you, I cannot stress this enough, report your crimes, okay? Come forward and do it in a timely manner so that we can actually do something about this. I'm not saying this to blame you. I'm not saying this to put pressure on you. I am saying this simply because there is nothing that we can actually do if you do not help us. And by us, I mean the law. I'm obviously not a part of the law, but, you know, a lot of feminists would probably place me on that side just because I'm a male. Nonetheless, right? The law needs help in this regard. They can't just be expected to take your word for it all the time. And the reason I say that is because the same reason I place the word legitimately, right? There are a lot of people, obviously 2 to 10%, right, of rape cases are proven to be lies. Proven to be lies. Okay? I mean, there you go, right? So we know it happens, and it happens in numbers that are not, I mean, in fact, if you take the high number there, which is 10%, and you take the 46, which is 20%, the actual proof for rape, right, is that it means that it shows that the actual, sorry, let me rephrase that, I messed up. The actual evidence behind rape statistics would show that you're actually only 2 times more likely to be raped than to have somebody falsely accuse somebody of rape, right? So they are that close, and only 10 times if you consider the fact that it's the 2%, which I imagine is probably somewhere in the center, like a 6%, right? Which is closer to like 3 times, maybe 3 1/3 times, right? Nonetheless, so we do need to just accept the fact that roughly 70%, if not more, of cases would just be something we have to drop because we are being legally consistent, making sure people are innocent until proven guilty. But if we are being consistent on both ends, then I see absolutely no problem with this. And I think we should punish both sides to the highest extent of the law that we can if they are guilty. And they need to be proven guilty. I cannot stress that enough, like I said. Nonetheless, let's move on. I've gone on 30 minutes now talking about Alabama, right? Sex offenders, including pedophiles, should be allowed to adopt, Theresa May has said, or was told, rather. This is from The Telegraph. I hate everything. Political correspondent Rosa Prince wrote this article. Rules which bar sex offenders from working with children are unfair, and even convicted pedophiles should have the right to adopt, a leading legal academic has said. Well, I don't know. Anytime any Brit ever says anything salty about the American Revolution, I'm just going to point right here and remind them that somebody obviously saw the future. We clearly had good reason. Anyways. Helen Reese, a reader in law at the London School of Economics, called on Theresa May, the Home Secretary, to relax rules which automatically... this is back in 2010, but it is something that I do think is very important that we need to talk about, okay? Especially considering Theresa May is in power now. And I'll get to why this is important in a minute, okay? Called on Theresa May, the Home Secretary, to relax rules which automatically ban sex offenders from caring for children, saying that this could breach their human rights. In an article in the Respected Child and Family Law Quarterly, Ms. Reese suggested that reoffending rates were not high among sex criminals, adding, quote, despite growing public concern over pedophilia, the numbers of child sex murderers are very low, end quote. A review is currently ongoing into the vetting and barring scheme introduced following the 2002 Soham murders and concerns by ministers that it is too heavily handed. As well as banning certain offenders, the law currently requires adults coming into regular contact with children other than their own to be screened. Ms. May ordered the review amid concerns about the vetting of ordinary volunteers such as parents who drive children to football practice and church flower arrangers. In her article, Ms. Reese suggests that the review should also introduce an assumption that sex offenders, including child abusers, pose no threat once they have served their sentence. She said, quote, there is no reason why all sex offenders should not be considered as potentially suitable to adopt or foster children or work with them. The vetting and barring scheme and other legislative measures single out sex offenders for unfair special treatment, and they destroy the principle that a prisoner pays his or her debt by serving their sentence before re-entering society on equal terms. Individuals are placed on the barred list and banned from working with youngsters or vulnerable adults if they are convicted of a sexual or violent offense or one with the involving the mistreatment of a child. Ms. Reese criticized the rules for leading all sex offenders to be, quote, tarred with the same brush, end quote, saying that while careful screening was important, the issuing of a blanket ban violated the rights of criminals who wanted to adopt or work with young people. I honestly can't even believe I'm reading this, but yes, this is a real article. Old, don't get me wrong, but real. She highlighted the case of a grandfather with a conviction for having sex with a 15-year-old dating back to when he was 29, who was refused permission to adopt his own grandchildren. The ban could contravene the principle of non-discrimination enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights. Oh my goodness. And may leave the government open to legal challenge, Ms. Reese warned. Comparing sex offenders to cohabitating couples, she suggested that the blanket bans on the former were allowed. It would make sense to bar those who were not married from adopting because parents who were wed were less likely to separate with harmful consequences for their child. Which, I mean, that's accurate. Why? I mean, I don't understand why that's not the current policy. You should only be allowed to adopt if you're married. Like, duh. Have you read any child psychology at all? It's like worse to raise a child single than it is to beat them, almost. Like, I don't quote me on that. I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I'm pretty sure the numbers, as far as like violent crime and sexual crime and running with gangs and drug use, are pretty similar on the two. So yeah, definitely. I mean, what if we said only married couples could adopt? Wouldn't that just be so oppressive? No, that is exactly the way it should be. Anyways. The ban, let's see, she also highlighted the case of 4 nurses who recently won a high court challenge after being barred for having convictions. One of the nurses was banned over a police caution for leaving her own children alone in their home. Quote, rather than presuming that everyone is a potential risk to children and must therefore be vetted, any vetting or barring should be based on very strong evidence that they are at risk, end quote, the academic said. This would represent a victory not only for human rights, but for protecting the best interests of children, end quote. Real quick, I want to pause. There's certain levels of truth to this, of course. For example, I do think a 15-year-old having sex with a 29-year-old is not the same thing as, for example, a 12-year-old having sex with a 29-year-old. There's a very obvious biological change known as puberty during that time. I also think that not letting somebody adopt their own grandchildren for a crime that was committed, decades ago, especially a crime that is not actually pedophilia or a violent rape, I do think that's going a little bit overboard. So we can find some common ground and agree here that the law does need to be toned down a little bit. That does not include letting pedophiles adopt children. I know this comes as a shock to people, but there is actually a very large fundamental difference between having sex with somebody who's post-pubescent, and somebody who is pubescent or prepubescent. Biologically speaking, you are geared to be disgusted by somebody having sex with a prepubescent or pubescent child. Biologically speaking, you are actually geared to be attracted to a post-pubescent woman, and that does, yes, include 16 and 17-year-old girls. A little fun fact for you that you might not like. Okay, that's because they're not little girls; they are actually adults. Okay, look at the vast majority of societies throughout world history. 15 or 16 is roughly the age you'd be getting married. In fact, Romeo and Juliet is a 13-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy, right? We're actually the oddballs out in this particular situation. But nonetheless, you guys want to have a problem with that, so be it. The point being, though, it is fundamentally different. Biologically speaking, one is not the same as the other. One is definitely consensual. One is definitely biologically normal. One is definitely biologically okay, whether or not you think it's morally normal. And biologically normal and morally normal are not the same thing. It is biologically normal to want to steal some grain from your friend, right? Because you don't have enough. That's not moral. So this isn't an argument for the morality of sleeping with 16 and 17-year-olds, but it is definitely an argument for saying it is not biologically weird. Sleeping with children is biologically strange. They can't produce more children because they themselves are children. Even if they do, by some fluke of nature, they can't raise those children. That is speaking from a strictly biological standpoint. From a moral standpoint, of course, it is incredibly psychologically scarring, and it's just outright disgusting. So no, there should definitely be a blanket ban on pedophiles and people who are legitimately abusing children, as in beating them or, serious neglect, right? Things like actually, very serious emotional trauma. Because I know a lot of emotional trauma these days is just people crying. But like, if you've ever read, for example, the story of a child called It, like that, yeah, that person should not be allowed to adopt children. Period. Like ever. For the rest of their entire lives. And I'm not saying, like I said, that I don't, but the reason I note this, though, okay, not only is it because Theresa May is, of course, the current prime minister in Great Britain, but it is also, and much more importantly, it is because these are the kinds of people who are gaining power in the West. People who say that pedophiles should be a protected class, that not letting them actually adopt is akin to not letting non-married couples adopt, which is something, first off, not only is that false, but having non-married couples adopt is a problem. You shouldn't do it, okay? And, by the way, let me just throw something out here that I know nobody wants to hear. This is definitely something that, it's just a little thought in the back of this person's head, Miss Reese's head. You can guarantee that she is defending Islam to a certain extent here. Because who do you think the vast majority of pedophiles, in Britain in particular, okay, are? When you consider the fact that they let their grooming gangs go. When you consider the fact that it is okay to marry a prepubescent girl in Islam, right? When you consider the fact that they have mass immigration from Islamic countries. Who do you think the majority of pedophiles are, at least the disproportionate amount, what group do you think the disproportionate amount of pedophiles is coming from? Of course, it's Islam. And of course, this law, as all liberal laws in Great Britain seem to be these days, are geared toward defending helpless Muslims, quote unquote, which don't actually exist, okay? Part of the reason why Muslims assimilate very well into the United States is because we don't play this nonsense. We do play this nonsense with a lot of Mexican immigrants, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of Mexican immigrants, both legal and illegal, who are not actually assimilating into our country when they should be, okay? There should be no problem having people from foreign countries or different skin colors or even of different religious and linguistic backgrounds in your nation, so long as they assimilate to the greater nation. You can still keep your religion, of course. You can still keep the kind of food you like, all that other kind of stuff. You can even still speak your own language in your own home or on your own free time. But speak English, understand my Constitution, vote in a way that is, responsible according to the way my Constitution is set up. Act in a way that is allowed by my laws and by my customs and things like that, right? Etc. Well, in Britain, they just let them do whatever they want, and it just ends up exactly like their other areas, right? Their other, nations, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, etc. So, just wanted to throw that out there. This is definitely in the back of her mind. You can guarantee for a fact she's wanting to defend Islam and the barbaric practices of child marriage in Islam, which are, of course, a big problem in the West because we don't approve of that kind of stuff. You'll see more of this coming. Whether it's defense of pedophiles or defense of homosexuals, because of course there's a lot of homosexual pedophiles, or defense of Islam, because there's a lot of Islamic pedophiles, you're going to see a lot more of this coming. And just get ready for it. But nonetheless, you know what else you're going to see a lot more coming of? This is from Barrett Wilson of the Post-Millennial 2 months ago. The Trudeau government wants to censor your social media. Yes, sirree. And if you did not know that, are you living under a rock? Perhaps a boulder. Have you been there since 3001 BC? Because this is obvious to literally everybody who pays attention. And I don't mean to sound condescending, but like, duh. Of course Trudeau wants to censor your social media. Pretty much every Western country that isn't the United States wants to censor your social media. Is this shocking to you? Obviously, Tommy Robinson and Marine Le Pen have both been, and Count Dankula and etc. have all been arrested and charged with crimes for saying stuff on social media. People have been arrested in Pakistan and etc. charged with crimes. People have been in Canada brought before human rights tribunals and charged with crimes for saying stuff on social media. This is surprising to you, the post-millennial? I mean, at least you're finally catching on board. The Trudeau government wants to censor your social media. Get out of here, ad. Global News is reporting today that the Trudeau government is considering forcing social media to remove extremist content. Ralph Goodale, the public safety minister, has declared his intentions to purge your Twitter and Facebook feeds of content the government deems problematic or toxic. A public safety minister existing at all is the first place you went wrong here, Canada. Quote, this has been a subject of discussion amongst ministers at the Five Eyes meeting and the G7 meetings, where ample discussion has been held on how we encourage the social media platforms to move quickly and efficiently to deal with toxic communications like this that incite violence and hatred and obviously do great damage to social cohesion. Goodale said, end quote. Of course, the problem with this statement is that one politician's idea of toxic communication may go beyond ISIS recruitment videos and vile Nazi propaganda. Nazi propaganda, by the way, should be legal. You could make an argument for ISIS recruitment not being legal since they had the intent to commit active crimes. But Nazi propaganda should be legal. Yeah, I know, uncomfortable, but you should totally have the right to say, I don't like Jewish people. Okay? Now, if you say that, you're a horrible person. You're disgusting. Lower than dog meat as far as I'm concerned. That being said, and by the way, you can all check out my constant railing against the anti-Zionists, right? It's not like I myself sympathize with any of these Nazi scum. But they have a right to say whatever it is that they want, so long as they are not actively advocating an immediate crime, not posing a threat to society in an immediate fashion, right? Nonetheless, what authoritarian politicians and ideologues deem toxic is often just an average person's cultural content. After the horrific New Zealand terror attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, media, activists, and politicians acted in unison to blame cultural figures who had absolutely nothing to do with the massacre. A New Zealand bookstore even went so far as to ban Jordan Peterson's self-help book. A self-help book. They banned a self-help book by a liberal Canadian professor of psychology because an eco-fascist killed a bunch of Muslims. Flawless logic there. No one was spared from the misguided accusations. Not even Chelsea Clinton. And while all of this social panic is going on, journalists and major outlets are helping to spread it. That is, when they're not too busy writing pointless takedowns of their fellow journalists for being mean 10 years ago. I like this writer. Seriously, what the hell are we doing? Where are our priorities? As we've seen recently in all of the Five Eyes Nation, England, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United States, it's very easy to broadly define a notion such as toxic communication in order to include harmless cultural figures. YouTubers like PewDiePie, psychology professors and public intellectuals like Jordan Peterson, prominent atheists like Sam Harris, reformers like Aryan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz, musicians like Tyler the Creator, philosophers and feminists like Megan Murphy and Christina Hoff Sommers, and comedians like Konstantin Kisin. All have been deemed hateful or Islamophobic or racist or sexist or gateways to the alt-right. And let's point out, it's not just them either, right? Shane Dawson has been attacked for conspiracy theories. Ben Shapiro has been attacked because being conservative is hateful. David Wood has been attacked because being a Christian is hateful. Michael Brown has been attacked for the exact same reason. And also, of course, you've had Robert Spencer for daring to criticize Islam, etc. Goes on. Even Alex Jones. I mean, all things considered, Alex Jones is extreme because he said that Sandy Hook didn't happen. How is that an extreme thought? It might be a fringe thought, but it's not extreme. It's not getting anybody hurt, right? Nobody's dying. He's not saying we need to go up and gas the journalists like everybody seems to think. I'd like you to show me a quote of Alex Jones saying that. Of course you can't. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter that the science behind such censorious slanders has already been debunked. Science. It doesn't matter that a book like Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life actually helps young people get their lives in order, promotes personal accountability, and helps potential problem cases avoid the pitfalls of online radicalization. And by the way, Jordan Peterson is one of the best deterrents the establishment right now has against far right-wing radicalization, without a doubt. And even just regular right-wing adoption, right? The adoption of right-wing ideas, period. Not even the radical extreme versions, you know what I mean? He's definitely a counter in a lot of ways to like Ben Shapiro and stuff like that. Doesn't matter that PewDiePie has helped countless young people suffering from depression find humor and comfort through his videos. Doesn't matter that Aryan Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz advocate for peace and women's rights. None of this seems to matter. Corporate and government censors will likely march on. Like dutiful firemen from Fahrenheit 451. Great comparison there. Really like this writer. Those who care about individual freedoms have already observed that these freedoms are quickly stripped away in the name of public safety. Governments, universities, and even bookstores have a tendency to take good intentions to the extreme in a nanosecond. It appears that they will use any human tragedy as an opportunity to find free speech, which is why I keep telling people, use the free market to your advantage. Make your own news organizations. Make your own universities, your own banks, your own bookstores, your own YouTube, right? The liberals are invited in our end. So when people say, oh, we're just going to get a divide between conservatives and liberals. No. See, they cut us out. But they eventually cut other liberals out too. Like, for example, PewDiePie and Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan and etc., right? But we don't. We allow them in. Our ideology says free speech, constitutionalism, etc. So if we found these groups off of constitutional values, then the echo chamber kind of just goes away if we're being consistent with them, of course. By the way, get on Gab. This is a perfect reason to get on Gab. Gab has already stated very clearly that they are not going to follow the laws of any other foreign organization, and also get NordVPN, because NordVPN allows you to basically bypass the firewalls in other countries and get into countries like China, get into countries in the European Union, and etc., and just, you know, continue on watching and sending and sharing blocked content. So NordVPN, Gab, get on it right now. Hashtag not sponsored. Anyways, at first, one wonders why the government even feels the need to do the dirty work of cultural censorship when the corporations are doing a pretty good job of it themselves. When you consider just how effective government and monopolistic corporations are at eliminating unwanted culture when they act in concert, then it becomes clear what's going on. They want you to consume only their culture. Bingo! The counterculture is now the establishment. And they are very tyrannical. This is where we're headed. No more provocative or heterodox ideas allowed. A future when a best-selling self-help book or a comedic viral video can be determined to be hate speech. On days like today, it's hard not to lose hope, and it's hard to conceive a future where freedom of expression isn't a thing of the past. On days like today, it feels like the dystopian future is already here for much of the Western world. For Canada, the only ray of hope is that there's a federal election coming up. I hope and I pray that Canadians will choose common sense over social justice and censorship, that we will trust our own eyes over the Five Eyes. We may not get many more chances. That is exactly correct. If you are watching this in Canada, you need to listen, and listen good, okay? Because your opportunities are limited. Lots of nations' opportunities are gone. I firmly believe Marine Le Pen was the last chance for France, and there's absolutely no way that she's going to get a build-up like that again. Really, all countries in Europe other than Britain are screwed at this moment without a collapse. Canada, I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. You know, Canada doesn't seem to be completely taken over. They do have human rights tribunals, so, I mean, in a lot of ways, they do have the gendered laws, right, where if you misgender someone, and you get fined an absolutely ridiculous amount and get brought to one of these, or brought before one of these human rights tribunals. They obviously have this moron, the prime moronic bastard, Justin Trudeau. Justin truly dumbered in all hell. I mean, you know, we'll see what happens, I guess. Realistically speaking, political change isn't going to do much without cultural change. You're not going to get cultural change without moral change. You're not going to get moral change without religious change, by which I mean people need to start serving God again, but nonetheless, that is a conversation for the other show. But just to be perfectly clear, we will never save any of these countries without God. I only got about 7 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about some stuff briefly. This I want to talk about from NBC News. The universe may be 1 billion years younger than we thought. Scientists are scrambling to figure out why. New research suggests the Big Bang that birthed the cosmos occurred 12.5 billion years ago. Why is this important? Why do I care? Well, because, to be perfectly honest with you, I think that all these numbers are completely ridiculous. I think it's completely pointless for us to sit here and start, oh, yeah, we've been 1 billion years off. First off, 1 billion years is a huge margin of error. And in fact, it's actually like 1/13th, 1/14th, somewhere in between there, right? So it's a pretty large percentage of error as well, right? But the fact of the matter is we don't know. Excuse me. We don't know. And this is just more evidence that we don't know. And this is more evidence as to why we need to be able to question things, because we don't know. And a lot of things have been proven to be false. Spontaneous generation has been proven to be false. We don't know if evolution is true. A lot of global warming rhetoric has been proven to be false. People do have a right to refuse vaccines if they want. You should not be forced to trust your experts because they are consistently proven wrong. That doesn't mean they are always wrong. That doesn't mean they never get anything right. That doesn't mean that they don't earn their right to have PhDs. That doesn't mean that they don't do very hard study and dedicate their lives to these things. What it does mean is that they're humans, and like all humans, they suck. So you should not be required to just blindly follow people who definitely suck, and they definitely do suck. We not only have a track record, but are they human? Yes, then definitely suck. That is just the way it goes, right? You need to understand this if you want to get anywhere in life. I'm sorry. But yeah, definitely read this article if you want. It's by Corey S. Powell, written on May 18th. NBC News, the universe may be a billion years younger than we thought. Scientists are scrambling to figure out why. Definitely a good article, good read. I would certainly recommend it. I know it's nothing but crap, but nothing but crap sometimes actually is not posting just crap. So it's not really nothing but crap. It's occasionally not crap. Anyways, over here on CBSN, we have Trump announces new subsidies to farmers to admit, Trump announces new subsidies to farmers to admit trade war with China. And I'm not particularly fond of this, but nonetheless, just to briefly read. Flanked by farmers and ranchers from across the country, President Trump announced $16 billion in new subsidies to farmers and ranchers throughout the through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. As the U.S.-China trade war continues, Mr. Trump suggested the billions of dollars would come through Treasury coffers as a result of tariffs. President Trump insists he is behind the men and women who support the nation's agricultural industry, even as they suffer from the tariffs he has imposed. President Trump has pushed for additional subsidies for farmers. Tensions between China and the U.S. have risen in recent days as both countries brace for the impact of tariff hikes. The president took a dig at Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, saying she lacks the capacity to understand the U.S., Mexico, Canada agreement he wants Congress to pass. Sorry. Quote, our great patriot... Oh my goodness, get out of here. Our great patriot farmers will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of what is happening now, end quote, the president tweeted earlier this month. Quote, hopefully China will do us the honor of continuing to buy our great farm product, the best, but not if your country will be making up the difference based on a very high China buy. The money will come from the massive tariffs being paid to the United States for allowing China and others to do business with us. The farmers have been forgotten for many years. Their time is now. Meanwhile, the president has been tearing Democrats, got to make sure to give them their proper gang name, after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggested more than once now that he is involved in a cover-up in withholding information from Congress. The president cut short an infrastructure meeting with Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and other Democrats, citing Pelosi's comments. Quote, I just wanted to let you know that I walked into the room and I told Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, I want to do infrastructure, I want to do it more than you want to do it. I'd be really good at that. That's what I do, the president said, but you know what? You can't do it under these circumstances, so get these funny investigations over with, end quote. The president's meeting was in the Roosevelt Room at 3:15 p.m. Now, not a fan of these subsidies. Not a fan of any subsidies. The government should not be subsidizing any private industry at all, period. End of the conversation. They're a waste of taxpayer money. We have a well over $22 trillion deficit right now, or not deficit, but debt right now, and a $500 billion deficit each year. We should not be spending more money. Furthermore, subsidies always end up hurting the people who they're intending to help, because people recognize we have free government money. With free government money, it means it doesn't really matter what we do. We're going to get bailed out by the government, so we can raise our prices no matter what. This is the same way they got prices to skyrocket as far as healthcare premiums and the student loans are concerned, right? Because it would be, oh, you're going to get paid off by the government? Well, then we'll raise it up from $7,000 to $10,000 because you're going to get paid off by the government. And we can get that $10,000. Super dope, right? Ends up hurting everybody in the long run. That being said, agriculture is one of the places where tariffs tend to suffer. Now, in my opinion, we have to deal with this, and there's other ways that we need to help our farmers out. For example, not regulating them to death. For example, allowing them to be free of Monsanto's thumb. For example, getting rid of the Department of Agriculture and giving them the freedom to farm, not putting them under a bunch of taxes and regulations and etc. Right? So there's a lot of ways we can help our farmers. Unfortunately, I do think they do need to kind of bite the bullet when it comes to these tariffs, because tariffs are a good thing. I know there's a lot of conservatives out there telling you tariffs are not a good thing. They're wrong. Tariffs are a good thing because tariffs force Americans to buy American. They force Americans to produce American. They force us to reestablish our crumbling infrastructure, our crumbling industry, and our crumbling economy, and then you can get rid of the protectionist tariffs and return to free trade. All for free trade, but we need to deregulate. We need to get rid of the taxes, we need to get rid of government bureaucracy, and we need to ensure that we reestablish industry jobs and treat farmers better in this country. They need to do both and tariffs is one of the ways you're going to do that. Another way you're going to do that is getting rid of the Department of Agriculture, getting rid of corporate taxes, and getting rid of regulations that are not needed. You need some, of course, but not all of them are needed. Lastly, very briefly, you guys will have to read this on your own because we're past an hour now. But Associated Press, Pelosi questions Trump's fitness. Is it time for intervention? She has said, quote, that, where is it here? Just suggesting family or staff intervention for the good of the nation after a dramatic blow up at the White House meeting with Democrats. Trump's spokeswoman said it's the Democrats who are insane, not the Republicans. Both the Republican president and Democratic leaders dug in a day after Trump stalked out of the cabinet room, demanding to end all congressional probes before he would work with Congress on the crumbling U.S. infrastructure and other matters. And, of course, Pelosi has also said that she's joked about the 25th Amendment, but she has also said that impeachment would end up failing because of a Senate that is controlled by Republicans. You should read this article for yourself. Is Trump unfit to run the country? Not any less fit than literally everybody else who's run the country since probably Calvin Coolidge, to be honest with you. You could make an argument for Ronald Reagan in his first term, but nonetheless. But it's just more political back and forth. I wanted to get into it more. Maybe we'll get into it more tomorrow, but unfortunately we can't get into it more now because we're done. So thank you guys very much for watching this. If you like this, please do like and share and subscribe here to the Synagogue. Cynicogue rather. We do post at least one episode of the Watchdog on here every single week. It's where you get to see my lovely mug, get this nice video quality, this nice audio quality. If you don't care too much about the quality, but you do want to hear us every single weekday, you can go to the American Cynic Party on Facebook and like us there. Follow us there. We go live on there every single day. Haven't been doing a terribly good job recently, but we're going to get back on that. We also, every weekend, have Unapologetics, which is another show we have here at the Cynicogue, hosted by yours truly. That one is about Christian apologetics and religion rather than news, politics, and etc. So it doesn't have quite as much of a secular vibe, definitely not talking as much about politics and things like that we also do sometimes. If you're interested in that, definitely check it out. Please do, again, subscribe here if you're interested. You can go to Minds and like us on the Cynicogue, Gab, and like us on C.J. Cox or ACP Official, Terrestrial Earthbird on Twitter, Cynic Thought on Instagram, and also I think that's it, actually, because I already gave you the American Cynic Party on Facebook. Thank you guys very much for watching this episode. Shalom, and have a good rest of your evening.